"We're going to be a family," said Blake. He had this way of always turning up behind you. I whipped around and glanced from him to Wanda, my mother. She'd gained some weight and it looked good. Her arm was stretched out, fingers spread like the twig hands of a snowman. She wiggled them, and the ring caught the light, glinting as garishly as the faux gold orbs on the Christmas tree behind her. "Here, let me take that." Blake dipped his fingers into the strap of my messenger bag, cutting into my shoulder, and pretended to collapse. "Christ, Meredith, whatever they've got you doing is way above your pay grade." He wasn't wrong. I was writing a grant for a multisensory playground installation at the local community center. "So, don't you have anything to say to us?" "Sorry, I was just taking it in. Congratulations." I heard it go a little flat. I disliked Blake from the get-go, but I'd been trying to change my mind ever since Wanda had told me, smiling, that Blake didn't mind my burns. That Blake didn't mind her burns. "He thinks they're sexy," she'd said, "because they tell a story." He didn't make it easy. There was the Steelers logo he'd shaved into the back of his head last football season, the adages he spouted as haughtily as if he'd come up with them. "Next to Godliness," he said once as he squirted blue dish soap into a cast iron pan. And the way he'd blurted, as if bestowing me with a precious gift, "Just so you know, I'm totally okay with your lifestyle. Love is love." I followed them into the living room where the tree leaned threateningly into the open space. "Babe," said Wanda, "you said you were going to try to fix that." "Shoot, you're right. Guess I got distracted by those delicious smells." Wanda turned to me. "I made mulled wine, learned from a YouTube video. Here, I'll get you some." She came back with 2 mugs, orange peels floating in the maroon liquid. "Listen, Meredith, I am so sorry about you and Larson," said Blake. "Breakups are the worst." "I'm really fine. It was for the best." I'd had to call last week to tell them Larson wasn't joining. What they didn't know, thank God, was that I was supposed to be the one showing off an engagement ring. I knew it wasn't reasonable, but I felt a bit like Wanda had pulled a fast one on me, stolen something for herself that was supposed to be mine. I leaned back in the armchair and its hinges squealed. "So how are you guys?" "Well, your mother hasn't had a cigarette in 6 weeks," said Blake. "Wow." "I know. I quit too. All the money we're saving on health insurance, we're going to put it toward a couple's spa day when we make it to the new year." "I told him I never smoked as far as Blue Cross knows, but he didn't listen," said Wanda, like Blake was a kid with a big imagination. "She won't be so wrapped up in these technicalities when she's in a mineral soap with cucumber slices on both her eyeballs," said Blake, rubbing Wanda's thigh. I looked away. "So," he said, "can you believe it? A white Christmas." I always forgot he was from Arizona. Hadn't seen snow till he moved to Pennsylvania 2 decades ago. "It's actually supposed to be record warm tomorrow," said Wanda. "It'll probably melt as soon as it stops. Might hit low 50s in the afternoon. This way the ice will melt before Meredith and me have to get on the roads for dress shopping." "How about that?" said Blake. "You know what I say." Wanda and Blake spoke the words in unison, beaming. Everything happens for a reason. This had been their anthem ever since they met a year and a half before, when a holiday bonus sent Wanda back to the plastic surgeon who had done her original reconstruction. She'd been burned almost to death as an 8-year-old when her seersucker Oshkosh party dress caught on fire at a church bonfire. It had eventually made her one of those women, a pitied wife for the 2 decades she spent with my father, who made her keep covered up, wouldn't let her jog in tank tops, till he finally left her when I was in high school. The same day she went in for her procedure, she met Blake in the parking lot of the medical office park. He was getting a consult for laser hair removal on his back. Whenever Wanda's accident came up, Blake liked to drop the old "everything happens for a reason" and explain how, in a way, her accident had brought them together all these years later. As for why Wanda had to endure 3rd-degree burns to have the privilege of Blake's love, when all he had to do to earn my mother's was have a hairy back and a plumbing contractor's salary to burn, well, I'm sure Blake would have had a reason ready if I ever asked. I turned in early. Around 9, Blake winked at Wanda and said, "If we don't go to bed soon, Santa won't come." I tried to forget that as I crawled beneath the polyester lilac comforter of my childhood bedroom, scrolling through my phone. My old college roommate, Rhoda, who I'd moved back in with after the split, had sent me a link to a Huffington Post article about infidelity. Apparently, it was the cool new thing to be cool with it. I deleted the message. Rhoda was always saying that I should go to therapy, but then Rhoda thought everyone needed counseling because she was a counselor, or more accurately, finishing her last semester of graduate school in counseling. I always half joked that I already had her for free. I wrote her back, not acknowledging the article, but to tell her about the engagement. There were 2 texts from Larson. The first was a plea to talk, which she'd sent nightly for 5 consecutive days now. The other was a photo of 6 wriggling dogs, skin pink as raw meat showing through white wisps of hair, red and green velvet bows around all their necks. Since her parents' business went under, they'd started breeding schnauzers. "We could have one of these little dudes," she'd written. She knew how much I'd wanted a dog growing up, though my father thought they were dirty. On our first date 3 years ago, Larson had asked if my mom and I were close. I told her of an anonymous email sent to all the girls in my 7th grade class, in which someone had copy-pasted an AOL instant message conversation between 2 boys who'd ranked every girl in class from 1 to 10 and included explanations written in Comic Sans. Frantically, I'd found myself on the 2nd page. 4, body's an 8, but she has a mustache. Wanda heard me crying on the floor. "Oh, kids are cruel," she said, when I explained. "They'll be on to the next thing. Just you watch. Besides, this is nothing compared to what it was like for me in junior high." She petted my head absently, and I cried harder because I knew it was true, what she had always implied, that I was ungrateful. And now I had a mustache and a cold heart, both. The next day, I waxed my upper lip with strips I bought with my allowance at Revco. I left them on longer than the box said because I wanted to be sure, and they took a little skin off with the hair, left 2 raw, burning places. Larson had been floored when I'd told her the story, which I'd chosen partly because I wanted to see if she'd be disgusted by mention of my upper lip hairs. If she was, I'd know I didn't need to bother with a second date. I always give potential partners these kinds of little tests, and they rarely pass them, though women had better odds than men, which was why I concentrated my energy there. But Larson proved herself, or at least I thought so then. She was in finance, which was a strike against her when Rhoda set us up, but she explained on the first date that she'd chosen that major to help her parents save their ailing Kinko's franchise. Perhaps it had something to do with her jawline in the lantern light against the exposed brick of the bar wall, but I was taken with the idea of a 25-year-old woman who made real, tangible sacrifices for other people. The night she proposed, we walked along the crooked Schuylkill River, orange with mud and waning light. It was a few hours later in bed that she told me about the guy, at the very beginning, before we were serious. "So stupid," she said, "an experiment, just to make sure." She'd hated it, just like she figured she would. A bottle and a half of Rex Goliath after I ended it, the feeling that I'd swallowed something sharp gave way to the feeling that I should have known, some soured version of satisfaction. I woke up first on Christmas morning. Wanda had no real half and half, just Irish cream flavored coffee mate. Blake's influence, probably. I hate black coffee, so I used it anyway. When I closed the fridge, I noticed a photo of Wanda and Blake at a pumpkin patch, his cheeks smushed up against hers. It was stuck on with a magnet from Telluride that we'd always had, though nobody we knew had ever been there. In my childhood, that same magnet had held another photo. My parents in front of the courthouse on their wedding day, close but not touching, Wanda's feet swollen in her sandals from her pregnancy. Her hand rested on her abdomen as if she had acid reflux. I choked down as much of the sweet, oily coffee as I could, then went to brush my teeth. There were 2 boxes of nicotine patches on top of the toilet, one bigger than the other, like his and hers. Something about that made me want to give a peace offering, and I remembered how the goofy lean of the Christmas tree needed fixing. Back in the living room, I knelt down next to the stand, the drying needles prickling my ear. I tried to right the angle, but one of the screws was missing. There would probably be a replacement in the shed, not that I necessarily know how to put it in, but I could try. Outside, I balked at the weirdly warm air. The sheen of ice on the pond was melting with popcorn cracks. My last visit home, Blake had tried fishing there, spent 3 hours on the rotting dock that could barely hold his weight before he finally pulled up a tiny trout that bled to death in his hand. Smiling all the while with bluing lips, Blake held the fish out proudly. Fish blood looked exactly like people blood. It gathered in the creases of Blake's fingers. He said that fishing made him feel closer to God. In the tool shed, I felt around for the grimy string that hung from the light bulb. Weak, musty light, as if someone had curated a museum of my childhood. There was the deflated snow tube, ripped apart by a snagged branch. A rope ladder I'd made when my father said he was going to redo the dock, but then never did. a box of My Little Ponies in the corner, dust in their cotton candy colored hair. The latch to the tool closet was rusted, but it opened easily. Most of the hooks on the wall were empty, and a rusted Folgers can was filled with only nails, so I yanked at a drawer until it squeaked out. Some yellowed car repair receipts, which I lifted up in hopes that maybe a lone screw would be rolling around at the bottom of the drawer. I had forgotten all about the photos. We'd taken a few and put them on Facebook, pretending to be swimsuit models or whatever. This turquoise knit bikini that I can't believe I liked. One leg straight and one bent, hand on the knee, hair clumped from the water, as if the brown sludge of the lake in the background was the Miami skyline. Me and Nina, my first girlfriend, though nobody had known that's what we were, as I was terrified of it getting back to my father. The summer between sophomore and junior year of high school. He must have printed them off. There were striations of orange from an ink cartridge running low. Next to the photos, a jar of Vaseline with the top off, marred with slick indentations, as if it had been punched. When I slipped back into the house, Blake and Wanda sat close together at the kitchen table, slicing peeled grapefruits into segments. I saw Mommy Kissing Santa Claus played through the radio static. Where have you been? Asked Wanda. Blake winked. Your mom hasn't had her coffee yet. He stood, kissed her on the top of the head. I thought I'd straighten out the tree for us, so I went hunting in the shed for an extra screw. Blake had his back to us now, measuring out coffee grinds, but I swear his hand froze for a moment. Can you help me with these? Said Wanda, handing me a knife. The chunks she'd already cut were piled in a bowl, red and raw as meat. A dish of saran-wrapped custard sat next to them. Wanda subscribed to a recipe mailing list, said Blake, then launched into something long-winded about some clients who had a house in the Poconos, how they were going to lend it to him for the honeymoon. I'll be right back, I said. In the bathroom, I sat on the floor, pulling my knees to my chest. I stared at the cracks in the linoleum, filled with little hairs and dead spiders, till my vision wetted and blurred. I hated that I wasn't crying because of what happened. I was crying because I couldn't tell Larson about it.